Have you ever seen this face? On a t-shirt, on a street mural, on a sticker, a billboard, a flag, or even hanging on the wall of a cafe, and wondered, who is this man? Why do people adore this portrait? Why is this image printed on millions of shirts across the world? Why do some people proudly call him a hero? The truth is, the man behind this image is far more fascinating than the image itself. Before he became a global symbol, he was a child who could barely breathe because of severe asthma. Before he inspired revolutions, he dreamed of becoming a doctor. Before he became an icon, he was just a young man riding an old motorcycle across South America in search of adventure. But what he witnessed on that journey changed him forever. It transformed a medical student into a revolutionary into a commander into a government minister, and finally, into a legend whose story continues to divide the world to this very day. In this video, we'll uncover the complete story of Che Guevara, from his childhood in Argentina, to the Cuban Revolution, his rise to global fame, his final mission in Bolivia, and the legacy that still sparks debate decades after his death. So, sit back, because this isn't just the story of a man. It's the story of an idea that refused to die. This is why Che Guevara's face is everywhere, the untold story. Every revolution has a beginning. Some begin with a gunshot. Others begin with an idea. But the story of Che Guevara began with something far more fragile, a breath. Imagine a cold morning in Argentina. It was June 14, 1928, in the bustling port city of Rosario. The streets echoed with the sounds of trams, merchants, and workers beginning another ordinary day. Inside a modest home, however, an extraordinary life had just begun. A baby boy was born to Ernesto Guevara Lynch and Celia de la Serna, two educated parents from respected Argentine families. They named their son Ernesto Guevara de la Serna. To everyone around him, he appeared to be just another healthy newborn. No one, not his parents, not the doctors, not even history itself, could have predicted that this child would one day become one of the most admired, feared, celebrated, and controversial men of the 20th century. But destiny did not welcome Ernesto with comfort. Before he was even 2 years old, he suffered his first severe asthma attack. His tiny chest tightened. His breathing became labored. His parents watched in horror as their son struggled desperately for air. The attacks became frequent. Many nights, while other children slept peacefully, Ernesto's parents stayed awake beside his bed, listening to every breath, terrified that the next gasp might be his last. His mother would cradle him for hours, trying everything she could to calm him. His father often felt helpless. Medicine in those days offered little relief. Every attack reminded the family of one painful reality: their son might never live a normal life. Doctors advised the Guevaras to leave Rosario. They believed the city's humid climate was worsening Ernesto's condition. Hoping to save their son, the family moved to Alta Gracia, a quiet town surrounded by fresh mountain air. The new environment helped, but it did not cure him. Asthma remained his constant companion. It followed him everywhere. It interrupted his sleep. It interrupted his childhood. It interrupted every dream that required strength. Most parents would have encouraged a child like Ernesto to avoid sports, avoid adventure, and avoid risk. But Ernesto refused to accept the limits his illness tried to impose. If asthma wanted to stop him, it would have to fight him every single day. Against all advice, he played rugby, a brutal sport that demanded endurance. During matches, he often collapsed to the ground, desperately reaching for his inhaler before jumping back into the game. His teammates admired his stubbornness. They couldn't understand how someone who could barely breathe refused to quit. That determination became one of the defining traits of his character. He hated surrender. He hated weakness. Most of all, he hated being told that something was impossible. Yet while his body often betrayed him, his mind flourished. Confined indoors during long periods of illness, Ernesto found refuge in books. Books became his escape from physical suffering. His family's library was filled with works on history, philosophy, literature, politics, economics, and science. Unlike many children who read only for entertainment, Ernesto consumed books with relentless curiosity. He wanted to understand why civilizations rose and fell, why wars were fought, why poverty existed, and why some people possessed unimaginable wealth while millions struggled simply to survive. He read adventure stories and imagined distant lands. He read poetry and learned the beauty of language. He read philosophy and began questioning everything society considered normal. His parents encouraged this curiosity. Their home was unlike many others in Argentina. It welcomed artists, intellectuals, political thinkers, and people with different opinions. Dinner conversations often turned into passionate debates about justice, freedom, inequality, and the future of Latin America. Young Ernesto rarely spoke much. Instead, he listened. He observed. He absorbed every idea. Those conversations planted seeds that would one day grow into convictions powerful enough to change his life forever. Despite his privileged upbringing, Ernesto never developed the arrogance often associated with wealth. He was curious about ordinary people. He wanted to know how farmers lived, how workers survived, and why so many families endured hardship despite working tirelessly every day. Questions filled his mind. Questions that no classroom could answer. As he entered his teenage years, another obsession began to take hold. Travel. He didn't simply want to see the world. He wanted to understand it. He believed maps showed borders, but roads revealed truth. He dreamed of crossing mountains, deserts, forests, and forgotten villages. Somewhere beyond Argentina, he believed, lay the answers to the questions that had haunted him since childhood. By the early 1950s, Ernesto Guevara was no longer the fragile boy who had spent countless nights fighting for breath. He was now a young medical student at the University of Buenos Aires, fascinated by science and determined to become a doctor. Medicine gave him purpose. He wanted to heal people. But deep inside, another question continued to haunt him. Why were so many people sick in the first place? Was disease simply a medical problem? Or was it born from something much larger: poverty, hunger, injustice, and inequality? Books had given him theories. He wanted evidence. Then came the opportunity that would change everything. His close friend, Alberto Granado, shared his love for adventure. Older than Ernesto and already working in a leprosy hospital, Alberto dreamed of crossing South America before settling into ordinary life. The two friends made an audacious plan. They would ride across an entire continent on an aging 1939 Norton 500 motorcycle. They jokingly called the machine La Poderosa II, the Mighty One. The name was optimistic. The motorcycle was anything but mighty. It leaked oil. It broke down constantly. Its engine coughed and rattled over rough roads. But to Ernesto, none of that mattered. This wasn't just a trip. It was an education no university could ever offer. In December 1951, they left Argentina behind. At first, the journey felt like an adventure. They laughed when the motorcycle stalled. They camped beneath open skies. They met strangers who welcomed them into humble homes with whatever little food they had. Yet with every mile they traveled north, the romance of the journey gave way to a much harsher reality. They encountered miners whose backs were permanently bent from exhausting labor while foreign companies grew rich from the minerals beneath their feet. They met farmers who worked land they would never own. Entire indigenous communities lived in crushing poverty, pushed to the margins of societies built upon their ancestors' lands. Children ran barefoot through villages where schools were scarce, healthcare was almost non-existent, and hunger was an everyday companion. Again and again, Ernesto asked himself the same question: how could a continent so rich in natural resources have so many poor people? As a medical student, he expected to treat illnesses. Instead, he discovered that the greatest disease he encountered was inequality. One encounter left a lasting mark on him. In the Chilean desert, he met a married couple searching for work. They owned almost nothing. Their clothes were worn thin. Their faces reflected years of hardship. They spoke quietly about losing their jobs and being persecuted because of their political beliefs. That night, Ernesto shared his blanket with them against the freezing cold. But sleep never came easily. He kept thinking about the injustice of a world where honest people could work tirelessly and still have nothing. The farther north they traveled, the more impossible it became for him to ignore what he had seen. His notebook, once filled with observations about landscapes and adventure, became a record of human suffering. When they reached Peru, another experience changed him forever. They visited the ancient city of Machu Picchu. Standing among the magnificent ruins of the Inca civilization, Ernesto wondered how such a great culture had been conquered and reduced to centuries of poverty and discrimination. History suddenly felt alive. The past was no longer a collection of dates. It was a living force shaping the present. Soon afterward, Ernesto and Alberto arrived at the San Pablo leper colony deep in the Peruvian Amazon. The colony housed hundreds of patients, isolated from society because of their disease. The staff expected visitors to keep their distance. Most people feared physical contact with the patients. Ernesto refused. He shook their hands. He laughed with them. He played football with them. He sat beside them during meals. To him, they were not outcasts. They were human beings deserving dignity. One evening, on his birthday, the patients gathered to celebrate with him. As darkness settled over the Amazon River, Ernesto looked across the water separating the doctor's quarters from the patient's side of the colony. Without hesitation, despite his chronic asthma and the strong current, he dived into the river and swam across to spend the evening with the patients. It was a simple act. Yet it revealed something profound about the man he was becoming. He no longer accepted the invisible barriers society placed between people. Not between rich and poor. Not between healthy and sick. Not between powerful and powerless. By the time the journey ended after nearly 8 months and thousands of miles, Ernesto Guevara had earned far more than memories. He had lost his innocence. He had seen exploitation, inequality, and suffering with his own eyes. The motorcycle had carried him across South America, but the experiences had carried him toward an entirely different destination. He returned to Argentina to complete his medical degree. Yet the young man who walked back into university was no longer dreaming only of curing individual patients. A far more dangerous idea had begun to grow inside him. He started to believe that treating disease was not enough. Perhaps, the entire system itself had to be changed. When Ernesto Guevara returned to Argentina after his unforgettable journey across South America, he kept one promise he had made to his family. He finished medical school. In 1953, he officially became a doctor. His parents were proud. They believed the years of struggle had finally led their son toward a stable and respected career. After all, Ernesto had always dreamed of healing people. His intelligence, determination, and compassion made medicine a natural calling. But while he had earned a medical degree, his heart was no longer in medicine alone. The faces of the poor he had met across South America refused to leave his mind. He remembered the miners who risked their lives for miserable wages. The indigenous families who had been forgotten by their own governments. The children whose greatest illness wasn't disease, but hunger. Again and again, one question echoed through his thoughts. Can a doctor truly cure people if the society they live in keeps making them sick? That question drove him away from the comfort of home once more. He left Argentina and began traveling through Latin America again, searching not only for answers but for purpose. His journey eventually brought him to Guatemala. At the time, Guatemala was attempting something extraordinary. Its democratically elected president, Jacobo Arbenz, was introducing ambitious land reforms. Vast estates owned by wealthy elites and foreign corporations were being redistributed to poor farmers who had spent generations working on land they could never own. To Ernesto, it looked like hope. For the first time, he believed he was witnessing a government genuinely trying to reduce inequality. But powerful interests saw something very different. They saw a threat. The reforms angered influential landowners and the powerful American company known as the United Fruit Company, which controlled enormous plantations across Central America. In 1954, Guatemala was thrown into chaos. A coup overthrew President Arbenz. The reform movement collapsed. Supporters were hunted. Many disappeared. Others fled. Ernesto watched helplessly as yet another dream of social change ended in violence. The experience shook him deeply. Until then, he had believed meaningful change could happen through peaceful reform. Now he began to doubt that belief. He concluded, rightly or wrongly, that those holding power would never surrender it voluntarily. The events in Guatemala hardened him. The idealistic medical graduate was becoming something else. Soon afterward, he escaped to Mexico. He arrived with little money, no permanent home, and no clear future. To survive, he worked as a doctor, took photographs, and accepted whatever jobs he could find. It was there, in the summer of 1955, that destiny finally caught up with him. One evening, Ernesto was introduced to two Cuban brothers living in exile. Their names were Fidel Castro and Raúl Castro. The brothers had recently been released from prison after a failed attempt to overthrow the Cuban government of Fulgencio Batista. Most people dismissed them as dreamers. Some called them reckless. Others thought they were finished. But Fidel spoke with remarkable confidence. For hours, he explained his vision for Cuba, a country free from dictatorship, corruption, and foreign domination. Ernesto listened carefully. This wasn't the first revolutionary he had met, but there was something different about Fidel. His conviction was absolute. By the end of their conversation, Fidel reportedly believed he had found more than a doctor. He had found a man who could become a revolutionary. For Ernesto, the decision came surprisingly quickly. He agreed to join the movement, not as a physician standing behind the front lines, but as a fighter. From that moment onward, his life changed forever. His medical bag was soon accompanied by a rifle. His knowledge of anatomy would now exist alongside military strategy. His dream of healing individual patients was giving way to a much larger and far more dangerous mission. During training in Mexico, Ernesto impressed the other recruits with his discipline. Asthma still tormented him. Long marches often left him exhausted. Sometimes he struggled to breathe while carrying heavy equipment. Yet he refused special treatment. If anything, he pushed himself harder than everyone else. His determination earned the respect of his comrades. It was during this period that his Cuban companions gave him a nickname. Whenever Ernesto spoke, he frequently used the Argentine expression Che, roughly meaning hey, or friend. The nickname stuck. Soon, almost no one called him Ernesto anymore. To everyone around him, he was simply Che. Months later, 82 men crowded onto an old yacht named Grandma. It was dangerously overloaded. The vessel wasn't designed for war. It wasn't even designed to carry that many people. Yet aboard that small boat sailed a group of men who believed they could overthrow an entire government. The sea was rough. Food ran short. Many became seasick. Some wondered whether they would even reach Cuba alive. As the Cuban coastline finally appeared on the horizon, none of them knew what awaited them. But one thing was certain. The doctor who had once dreamed of saving lives was about to enter a brutal guerrilla war. The dawn of December 2nd, 1956, was supposed to mark the beginning of Cuba's liberation. Instead, it became the beginning of a nightmare. After 7 exhausting days crossing the Gulf of Mexico aboard the overcrowded yacht Granma, the revolutionaries finally reached Cuba. Their arrival, however, was nothing like they had planned. The boat had arrived late. The carefully coordinated uprising that was meant to support them had already failed. Government forces had been alerted. And before the rebels could properly organize themselves, Batista's army was already closing in. The men stumbled through muddy swamps, exhausted, hungry, and carrying heavy weapons. Mosquitoes covered their bodies. Their clothes were soaked. Many had barely slept since leaving Mexico. Then disaster struck. Government soldiers ambushed the group near Alegría de Pio. Machine guns ripped through the sugarcane fields. Bullets tore through the silence. Men screamed. Some died instantly. Others scattered in every direction. Within minutes, the revolutionary force had been shattered. The dream of overthrowing Batista seemed finished before it had even begun. Of the 82 men who had sailed from Mexico, only a small handful managed to escape into the dense forests of the Sierra Maestra mountains. Che was among them. During the attack, he faced a decision that would define the rest of his life. On the ground before him lay 2 bags. One contained medical supplies. The other contained ammunition. He knew he could carry only one. For a brief moment, the doctor inside him hesitated. Then he reached for the ammunition. Years later, Che would recall that decision as the moment he fully accepted that he was no longer simply a physician. He had become a soldier. The survivors wandered through the mountains, starving and exhausted. They had almost no food. Little ammunition. No certainty that the revolution could continue. Many would have surrendered. Others would have fled the country. But Fidel Castro refused to abandon the fight. When the scattered survivors finally reunited, someone counted their numbers. There were only a dozen or so men left. An entire revolution now rested on the shoulders of a tiny group hiding in the mountains. To Batista's government, it seemed laughable. How could fewer than 20 exhausted rebels possibly defeat an army of tens of thousands? The government announced that Fidel Castro had been killed. Newspapers repeated the claim. Officials believed the rebellion was over. They were wrong. Hidden among the forests of the Sierra Maestra, the rebels slowly rebuilt their strength. The mountains became their fortress. The jungle became their shield. Every tree concealed danger. Every narrow trail could hide an ambush. The rebels survived because local peasants shared what little they had. Poor farming families offered food, shelter, and information, often risking imprisonment or death if they were caught helping the guerrillas. Che never forgot their generosity. He treated sick children. He cared for wounded farmers. He used his medical training whenever possible, earning the trust of many rural communities. But he was also becoming something else. A military commander. Life in the mountains was merciless. Food was scarce. Rain soaked their clothes for days. Boots fell apart. Malaria and other illnesses threatened the camp. Che's asthma attacked him relentlessly. Sometimes he struggled to breathe so badly that every step became agony. His comrades urged him to rest. He refused. Instead, he marched beside them, often carrying the same heavy loads despite barely catching his breath. His determination inspired those around him. If the man with chronic asthma could keep climbing steep mountain trails under enemy pursuit, no one else had an excuse to complain. As months passed, Che proved himself not only brave but highly disciplined. Fidel began assigning him greater responsibilities. He organized military training. He enforced strict discipline among the rebels. He demanded honesty. He insisted that civilians be treated respectfully and that theft from poor farmers be punished. Yet he could also be uncompromising. Those accused of spying for Batista or betraying the movement sometimes faced revolutionary justice, including execution after guerrilla trials. Supporters argued such measures were necessary in a brutal civil war. Critics saw them as harsh and unforgiving. These actions would later become one of the most debated aspects of Che Guevara's legacy. What could not be denied, however, was his growing influence within the movement. The frightened medical student who had landed in Cuba months earlier was disappearing. In his place stood a commander respected by his men and feared by his enemies. The Sierra Maestra was doing more than sheltering a revolution. It was forging one of its most recognizable leaders. Far below the mountains, Batista still believed he could crush the rebellion with superior numbers and modern weapons. But he underestimated one crucial truth. Armies fight for orders. Revolutionaries fight for belief. And belief can sometimes prove stronger than bullets. Nearly 2 years had passed since the battered survivors of the Granma landing had taken refuge in the Sierra Maestra mountains. What had begun as a desperate struggle for survival had transformed into a growing revolution. The rebels were no longer simply hiding. They were advancing. With every successful ambush, more weapons fell into their hands. With every victory, more young Cubans joined their ranks. Batista's soldiers, though better equipped, were beginning to lose something far more valuable than rifles or ammunition. They were losing confidence. The Cuban army had tanks, aircraft, artillery, and thousands of soldiers. The rebels had none of those advantages. What they possessed instead was discipline, mobility, and the support of many people living in the countryside. They struck quickly, disappeared into forests and mountains, and attacked only when the odds favored them. As the months passed, Batista ordered massive military offensives against the rebels. Thousands of government troops entered the Sierra Maestra. The plan seemed simple. Surround the revolutionaries. Destroy them. End the rebellion once and for all. Instead, the opposite happened. The government's soldiers struggled in unfamiliar terrain. Heavy equipment became useless on narrow mountain trails. Supply lines stretched thin, morale collapsed, and many troops found themselves fighting an enemy they could rarely see. The revolution survived. For Fidel Castro, the time had come to carry the war beyond the mountains. He divided his forces into separate columns. One of the most important would be led by Che Guevara. It was an enormous responsibility. Che was ordered to march hundreds of kilometers across Cuba, moving through enemy territory to the central province of Las Villas. His mission was nothing less than to cut the island in two, disrupt Batista's communications, unite different anti-government groups, and prepare the way for the final assault. It was one of the boldest operations of the entire revolution. The journey tested every man. They crossed rivers swollen by rain. They marched through swamps and dense forests. They slept on the ground with little food. Government aircraft searched for them from above. Enemy patrols hunted them from below. Che's asthma returned with frightening intensity. Some nights he could barely breathe. His coughing echoed through the darkness. Yet every morning, he picked up his rifle and continued walking. His determination earned the admiration of many of his fighters, who saw him enduring the same hardships they did despite his chronic illness. As Che's column advanced, town after town slipped from government control. Railway lines were sabotaged. Bridges were destroyed. Batista's supply routes became increasingly unreliable. The revolution was spreading faster than the government could contain it. Then came the campaign that would define Che Guevara's military reputation. The city of Santa Clara. Located near the center of Cuba, Santa Clara was one of Batista's most important strongholds. Whoever controlled it controlled vital transportation routes across the island. Batista reinforced the city with thousands of troops, armored vehicles, and even an armored train loaded with soldiers, weapons, and ammunition. The government believed the train was unstoppable. It represented the strength of Batista's military. Che saw it differently. He recognized that if the train could be neutralized, the balance of power might shift dramatically. Using bulldozers and construction equipment, the rebels tore up sections of the railway track. When the armored train reached the damaged line, it derailed. Trapped and unable to maneuver, the soldiers aboard found themselves surrounded. After hours of fighting, many surrendered. The rebels captured large quantities of weapons and ammunition, resources they desperately needed. The fall of the armored train became one of the most famous moments of the Cuban Revolution. It dealt a severe psychological blow to Batista's government and boosted the confidence of the rebels. With momentum now on their side, Che's forces pressed into Santa Clara. Street fighting erupted. Barricades appeared. Gunfire echoed through the city. After intense combat, government resistance collapsed. Santa Clara had fallen. When news reached Havana, panic spread through Batista's inner circle. If Santa Clara was lost, the capital could be next. In the early hours of January 1, 1959, after nearly 7 years in power, Fulgencio Batista fled Cuba with members of his government, taking large amounts of money and leaving behind a country in turmoil. The dictatorship had come to an end. Across Cuba, thousands poured into the streets. People embraced strangers. Church bells rang. Flags waved from windows and rooftops. Many celebrated what they believed was the birth of a new era, one that promised justice, reform, and national dignity after years of dictatorship. For Che Guevara, the victory was deeply symbolic. Only a few years earlier, he had arrived in Cuba as a foreign doctor with little more than a backpack, an inhaler, and a belief that change was possible. Now he had helped lead a revolution that had overthrown a government. But winning a revolution and governing a country were two very different challenges. The hardest battles were still to come. As Fidel Castro's revolutionary forces entered Havana, Che was given one of the revolution's most sensitive responsibilities. He was placed in charge of the military fortress known as La Cabana, overlooking Havana Harbor. The fortress had once been a symbol of Batista's military power. Now it belonged to the revolution. Its cells were filled with former military officers, police commanders, and officials accused of torture, murder, and crimes committed during Batista's rule. The new government faced an impossible question. What should be done with those accused of such crimes? The answer would become one of the most controversial chapters in Che Guevara's life. Revolutionary tribunals were established to investigate allegations against former officials. Some defendants were acquitted, others received prison sentences, and many were sentenced to death after being found guilty by the revolutionary courts. Che, as commander of La Cabana, oversaw the prison where many of these sentences were carried out. Supporters of the revolution argued that these trials were necessary to hold accountable those responsible for years of torture, disappearances, and killings under Batista's regime. They believed justice had finally arrived for the victims. Critics, however, argued that the trials often lacked the legal protections expected in independent courts and that executions were carried out too quickly. To this day, historians continue to debate the fairness of these proceedings and Che's role in them. There is little disagreement, however, that this period permanently shaped his reputation. To many, he became a hero of justice. To others, he became a symbol of revolutionary severity. The same actions that inspired admiration in some parts of the world sparked condemnation in others. Yet Che's responsibilities extended far beyond the fortress. Fidel Castro trusted him with some of the most important tasks in the new government. Despite having no formal training in economics, Che was appointed to lead the National Bank of Cuba. The story of how it happened has become legendary. During a meeting, Fidel reportedly asked if anyone present was an economist. According to a popular account, Che mistakenly thought he had asked for a communist and raised his hand. Whether the story is entirely true or partly myth, it reflects the unusual reality of the revolution. Experienced administrators were scarce. The new government relied heavily on people it trusted. Che approached the job with the same determination he had shown in the mountains. He signed Cuba's banknotes simply with the word, Che. It was an extraordinary break from tradition. Soon afterward, he became Cuba's Minister of Industries. His days were now filled not with jungle marches but with endless meetings, factory inspections, and plans to transform the country's economy. He pushed for rapid industrialization. He encouraged voluntary labor, believing that citizens should work not only for wages but also out of commitment to building a new society. On weekends, he often joined workers in sugarcane fields or construction sites, picking up tools himself rather than merely giving orders. Photographs of Che cutting sugarcane alongside ordinary laborers spread across the world. To many supporters, he embodied the revolutionary ideal, a leader willing to work as hard as everyone else. Yet governing proved far more complicated than fighting. Cuba faced enormous economic challenges. Many professionals had left the country. The United States and the new Cuban government grew increasingly hostile toward one another. As political tensions intensified, Cuba drew closer to the Soviet Union. The small Caribbean island had become one of the most important battlegrounds of the Cold War. Che found himself traveling across the world, representing Cuba in Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. Wherever he went, crowds gathered. Some saw him as the face of hope for oppressed nations. Others viewed him as the dangerous ambassador of communist revolution. His image was becoming larger than the man himself. The bearded guerrilla in the olive-green uniform was no longer just a Cuban commander. He had become an international icon. But despite his growing influence, Che was restless. Government offices felt like prisons. Paperwork bored him. Meetings exhausted him. He had not left Argentina to become a bureaucrat. He believed the revolution should not stop at Cuba's shores. If injustice existed elsewhere, then, in his mind, the struggle had to continue elsewhere too. By 1965, Che Guevara had become one of the most recognizable men on earth. He was no longer just a guerrilla commander. He was a minister in the Cuban government. He represented Cuba at international conferences. He met presidents, prime ministers, diplomats, and revolutionary leaders from across Asia, Africa, Europe, and Latin America. In December 1964, he stood before the United Nations General Assembly in New York. The world watched as the bearded revolutionary from Cuba delivered a fiery speech criticizing colonialism, racism, and foreign intervention. He defended Cuba's revolution and argued that poorer nations had the right to determine their own future without outside domination. To his supporters, he spoke with courage. To his critics, he spoke with dangerous conviction. No matter where one stood politically, one thing was undeniable. Che Guevara had become a global figure. His photograph appeared in newspapers around the world. Young revolutionaries admired him. Governments monitored his every move. Intelligence agencies followed his activities with growing concern. Yet behind the international fame, Che felt increasingly uncomfortable. Government life had become routine. Every day brought another meeting, another report, another speech, another stack of documents waiting to be signed. This was not the life he had imagined while fighting in the Sierra Maestra. He believed that the Cuban Revolution would survive only if revolutions spread beyond Cuba. In his view, poverty, dictatorship, and foreign domination were not uniquely Cuban problems. They existed throughout Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And if they existed elsewhere, then, he believed, revolution should spread elsewhere too. This idea became central to his philosophy. He argued that small groups of determined guerrilla fighters could inspire broader popular uprisings against oppressive governments. It was a strategy that had worked in Cuba, and he hoped it could succeed again. Not everyone in the Cuban leadership agreed. Some believed Cuba should focus on strengthening its own economy before supporting struggles abroad. Che disagreed. The debate reflected different visions for Cuba's future. Then, one day, Che Guevara simply vanished. He stopped appearing at public events. Foreign journalists searched for him. Rumors spread across the world. Some claimed he had fallen seriously ill. Others believed he had been imprisoned. Some even suggested he had been killed. No one outside a small inner circle knew the truth. The reality was even more astonishing. Che had secretly resigned from all his government positions. He gave up his role as Minister of Industries. He gave up his position in the National Bank. He gave up his rank within the Cuban government. According to Fidel Castro, Che also renounced his Cuban citizenship, which had been granted to him after the revolution, so that Cuba would not be officially linked to his future military campaigns. Before leaving, Che wrote a deeply personal farewell letter to Fidel. In it, he expressed gratitude for the trust placed in him during the Cuban Revolution. He reaffirmed his belief in the revolutionary cause. He also wrote words that would become famous: "Other nations of the world call for my modest efforts." It was an extraordinary farewell. He was voluntarily leaving behind power, influence, and international recognition to return to the uncertainty of guerrilla warfare. His wife, Aleida, and their children remained in Cuba. It was a painful decision. Che understood the risks. He knew he might never see them again. Yet he believed his personal sacrifices were necessary for the ideals he had embraced. Using false identities, changing his appearance, and traveling in complete secrecy, Che disappeared from public view. Even many of his closest friends had no idea where he had gone. His first destination was the heart of Africa. The Democratic Republic of the Congo had recently descended into conflict following independence from Belgium. Several rebel movements were fighting the central government, and Che believed the country might become the next successful socialist revolution. He arrived quietly, without publicity, without fanfare. Once again, he exchanged government offices for jungle camps. Once again, he carried a rifle instead of official documents. But this campaign would be nothing like Cuba. The Congolese rebels lacked organization. Different factions disagreed with one another. Discipline was weak. Supplies were scarce. Disease spread rapidly through the camps. Communication was poor. Che soon realized that courage alone could not overcome these problems. For months, he tried to train fighters, improve discipline, and build a more effective guerrilla force. The results were deeply disappointing. Unlike in Cuba, the movement never gained the unity or momentum he believed was essential for success. Reluctantly, Che concluded that the mission had failed. He withdrew from the Congo in late 1965. It was one of the greatest disappointments of his life. Many people would have accepted defeat. Many would have returned permanently to Cuba. Many would have spent the rest of their lives as respected political leaders. Che did none of those things. Failure did not weaken his determination. It strengthened it. He became convinced that his next attempt had to be in Latin America, the continent where his revolutionary journey had first begun. He believed one country, in particular, could become the spark that would ignite change across South America. That country was Bolivia. In late 1966, a man carrying a false passport quietly crossed into Bolivia. Few people recognized him. His thick beard was gone. His famous long hair had been cut short. He wore glasses. His face appeared older. He had even altered his posture and mannerisms to avoid attracting attention. The transformation was so convincing that some of his own acquaintances would have struggled to recognize him. The man was Che Guevara. After the failed campaign in the Congo, he had not abandoned his dream of spreading revolution. Instead, he believed Bolivia was the ideal place to begin again. Situated in the heart of South America and sharing borders with several countries, Bolivia seemed strategically important. Che hoped that a successful guerrilla movement there might inspire similar uprisings across the continent. It was an ambitious vision. Perhaps too ambitious. Hidden in the remote forests of southeastern Bolivia, Che and a small group of Cuban and Bolivian guerrillas established a secret training camp. Once again, life resembled the early days in Cuba. The rebels built shelters from branches and leaves. They survived on limited food. They trained with their weapons. They studied maps. Every movement had to remain hidden. Every campfire risked revealing their position. But from the very beginning, problems emerged. Unlike the Cuban Revolution, where many rural peasants eventually offered food, information, and shelter, the situation in Bolivia was very different. Many local farmers viewed the unfamiliar guerrillas with suspicion. Some feared government retaliation if they offered assistance. Others simply did not understand why these foreign fighters had come to their country. Che had expected the local Communist Party to provide significant support. Instead, disagreements developed, leaving the guerrilla force increasingly isolated. Without strong local backing, every day became more difficult. Food supplies dwindled. Medicine became scarce. Communication with Cuba grew unreliable. The mountains and forests that were supposed to protect them slowly became a prison. Meanwhile, the Bolivian government had become aware of the guerrillas' presence. Determined to eliminate the insurgency, it deployed soldiers into the region. The campaign received assistance from foreign advisors, including support from the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, reflecting the wider Cold War tensions of the era. The search intensified. Day after day, government patrols closed in. Che's asthma returned with relentless force. The damp mountain air made breathing almost unbearable. At times, every step left him gasping for breath. Yet he refused to abandon his men. Even when he could barely walk, he continued marching alongside them. His diary from Bolivia reveals both determination and growing frustration. He wrote about hunger, about exhaustion, about the lack of local support, about comrades lost in battle. Yet he never wrote as a man who believed he had failed. He continued planning, continued hoping, continued fighting. By the autumn of 1967, however, the situation had become desperate. The guerrilla force had been reduced dramatically. Some fighters had been killed. Others had been captured. The survivors were constantly on the move, avoiding increasingly effective military patrols. Then came the final confrontation. On October 8, 1967, in a narrow ravine known as the Quebrada del Euro, Bolivian soldiers surrounded Che's small group. Gunfire erupted. The rebels fought back fiercely. During the battle, Che was wounded. His rifle was damaged. Unable to escape, he was captured alive. For the first time in years, the man who had survived jungles, mountains, and revolutions found himself completely at the mercy of his enemies. He was taken to the tiny village of La Higuera. There, he was confined to a small classroom that had been turned into a makeshift prison. Throughout the night, soldiers guarded him, officers questioned him. Witnesses later recalled that despite his condition, Che remained calm. The following day, Bolivia's leadership decided that he would not stand trial. Instead, orders were issued for his execution. On the afternoon of October 9, 1967, a Bolivian sergeant entered the classroom. According to several historical accounts, Che looked at the soldier and spoke words that have since become legendary. "I know you've come to kill me. Shoot, coward. You are only going to kill a man." Historians continue to discuss the exact wording of his final moments, but there is broad agreement that he faced death with remarkable composure. Moments later, gunshots echoed through the small schoolhouse. Che Guevara was 39 years old. News of his death spread rapidly across the globe. The Bolivian government displayed photographs of his body, believing they had ended the legend forever. Instead, those images had the opposite effect. To supporters, he became a martyr. To critics, he remained a dangerous revolutionary whose ideas had brought violence. To historians, he became one of the most influential and debated figures of the 20th century. Upon his death inside a small schoolhouse in La Higuera marked the end of his journey. But his story was not over. In fact, that was the moment his legend truly began. The Bolivian government believed that by killing Che, they had eliminated one of the world's most determined revolutionaries. Officials hoped his death would discourage others from taking up arms. Instead, news of his execution spread across every continent. Newspapers carried his photograph on their front pages. Radio stations interrupted regular programming. Governments reacted. Students marched. Supporters mourned. Critics celebrated. The world had lost a man, but gained a symbol. Shortly after his death, Bolivian authorities secretly buried Che's body in an unmarked grave near the town of Valle Grande. They hoped that by hiding his remains, they would prevent his grave from becoming a place of pilgrimage. For nearly 30 years, no one outside a small circle of officials knew exactly where he had been buried. Rumors flourished. Some claimed the body had been destroyed. Others believed it had been secretly transported to another country. The mystery only added to the legend. Then, in 1997, investigators located remains believed to be Che Guevara's and several of his comrades near Valle Grande. After forensic examinations, the remains were transferred to Cuba, where they were reburied with full state honors in the city of Santa Clara, the very city where Che had won one of the revolution's most decisive victories. Thousands attended the ceremonies. For many Cubans, it felt as though a fallen commander had finally come home. Yet Che's greatest monument was never a statue. It was an image. In 1960, Cuban photographer Alberto Corda had captured a single photograph of Che during a memorial service in Havana. Che stared into the distance. His expression was calm, determined, almost timeless. To this day, that photograph became one of the most reproduced images in history. It appeared on posters, t-shirts, murals, flags, books, coffee mugs, keychains, fashion collections, music albums, university walls, protest banners, and social movements around the world. Ironically, a man who fiercely criticized consumerism became one of the most commercially reproduced faces in modern history. Many people wore the image without knowing the story behind it. Some saw rebellion. Others saw courage. Some saw hope. Others saw revolution. The photograph had become larger than the man himself. But Che's legacy extends far beyond a famous portrait. To millions of people, particularly in parts of Latin America, Africa, and Asia, Che remains a symbol of resistance against oppression, inequality, and foreign domination. They admire his willingness to leave comfort behind and risk his life for causes he believed were just. They point to his personal discipline, his refusal to seek wealth, his decision to share the hardships of ordinary soldiers, his willingness to work alongside factory workers and farmers even after becoming a government minister. To them, Che represents commitment. A man who lived according to his beliefs, whatever the personal cost. Yet there is another side to the story. Critics argue that Che Guevara's support for armed revolution contributed to cycles of violence. They point to his role in the revolutionary tribunals after the Cuban Revolution and question whether those trials met standards of due process. Others criticize his economic policies during his time in government, arguing that many of his ideas proved impractical and contributed to difficulties in Cuba's economy. For these critics, Che is not merely a romantic revolutionary. He is also a deeply controversial political figure whose actions had lasting consequences. This divide explains why Che Guevara continues to provoke such strong emotions decades after his death. In some countries, schools teach him as a hero. In others, he is remembered far more critically. Historians continue to debate his decisions, his methods, and the impact of his ideas. Yet there is one point on which almost everyone agrees. Very few individuals have left such a profound mark on global political culture. Che's life lasted only 39 years. But in those years, he transformed himself from an asthmatic boy in Argentina into a doctor, from a doctor into a guerrilla fighter, from a guerrilla fighter into a revolutionary commander, from a commander into an international statesman, and finally, into one of the most recognizable symbols of the 20th century. Whether viewed as a hero, a revolutionary, an idealist, or a controversial figure, Che Guevara's story forces us to confront difficult questions. How far should someone go in pursuit of justice? Can violence ever create lasting peace? Can noble ideals justify harsh methods? And when does a revolutionary become a legend? Those questions remain unanswered. Perhaps that is why Che Guevara continues to fascinate the world nearly 6 decades after his death. Because history rarely divides its most influential figures into simple categories of heroes and villains. Instead, it leaves us to wrestle with the complexity of their lives. And few lives are more complex than that of Ernesto Che Guevara. His life remains one of the most fascinating and debated stories in modern history. To some, he was a fearless revolutionary who dedicated his life to fighting injustice. To others, he was a deeply controversial figure whose methods and beliefs continue to spark debate. Whatever your perspective, one thing is undeniable: Che Guevara changed history, and his name still echoes around the world decades after his death. History is rarely black and white. It is filled with people whose lives inspire, challenge, and remind us to think critically about the choices that shape our world. That's the inspirational story of Ernesto Che Guevara. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next inspiring story here on Inspirational People. And remember, the greatest revolutions don't always begin on battlefields. Sometimes, they begin in the human heart with the courage to question, to learn, and to strive for a better future. Until next time, stay inspired, stay curious, and never stop learning from history. Before you go, let's help save our planet. As we end today's story, let's remember that we all have a role in protecting the only home we share. Plant a tree whenever you have the opportunity. Conserve water, every drop counts. Reuse and recycle whenever possible. Never litter, dispose of waste responsibly. Turn off lights and electrical appliances when they're not in use. Walk, cycle, or use public transport when practical to reduce pollution. Encourage others to care for the environment. The earth doesn't belong to us, we borrow it from future generations. Let's leave it greener, cleaner, and healthier than we found it.